The crimson swamp stretched endlessly under the twin suns of the distant planet Zorath. The air was thick with humidity, and the ground squelched underfoot, a mixture of mud and alien vegetation. The trees here were towering, their trunks a deep shade of purple, with leaves that shimmered like liquid gold. It was a place of beauty and danger, where every step could mean life or death. In the heart of this swamp, a human explorer named Jason Carter trudged forward, his boots sinking into the mud with each step. His mission was simple: to survey the area for potential resources that could aid humanity's expansion into the galaxy. But the swamp had other plans. As he pushed through a thicket of glowing vines, he heard a sound, a soft, melodic cry for help. Jason froze, his hand instinctively going to the blaster at his side. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing through the dense foliage. The cry came again, closer this time. He moved cautiously, following the sound until he reached a clearing. There, in the center of a pool of thick, bubbling mud, was a sight that took his breath away. A woman, no, not a woman, an alien, was trapped waist-deep in the mud. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, with faint bioluminescent patterns that pulsed gently in the dim light. Her hair was long and silver, flowing like liquid metal down her back. She wore a suit of some kind, but it was torn and caked with mud. Her eyes, a striking shade of violet, locked onto his, filled with desperation. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Help me." Jason hesitated. He had heard stories of alien traps, of creatures that lured humans to their doom. But something about her felt different. Her fear seemed genuine, and the way she looked at him stirred something deep within him. He couldn't just leave her there. "Hold on," he said, stepping closer. "I'll get you out." He scanned the area, looking for something to use as a tool. Spotting a fallen branch nearby, he grabbed it and extended it toward her. "Grab onto this." She reached out, her slender fingers wrapping around the branch. Jason pulled with all his strength, but the mud was relentless, sucking her back down. She cried out in frustration, her voice filled with despair. "It's no use," she said. "The mud, it's alive. It won't let me go." Jason's mind raced. He had to think of something, and fast. The swamp was no place to linger, especially with nightfall approaching. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing in determination. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I'm Jason. And I promise you, I'm not leaving here without you." He knelt down, studying the mud. It seemed to pulse and shift, as if it had a mind of its own. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small device, a portable energy cutter. "This might work," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He activated the cutter, its blade glowing with a bright blue light. Carefully, he began to cut away at the mud around her, slicing through the thick, viscous substance. It hissed and bubbled, recoiling from the heat of the blade. Sarah watched in awe as Jason worked, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You're different," she said softly. "Most humans would have left me here." Jason glanced up at her, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm not most humans," he continued cutting, the mud slowly releasing its grip on her. Finally, with one last pull, he managed to free her from the swamp's clutches. She stumbled forward, collapsing into his arms. For a moment, they just stood there, her body pressed against his, both of them breathing heavily. Jason could feel the warmth of her skin, the way her bioluminescent patterns flickered in response to his touch. It was intoxicating. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I owe you my life." Jason shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Let's just get out of here before that mud decides it wants us both." As they made their way through the swamp, Sarah stayed close to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. There was a connection between them, something unspoken but undeniable. Jason couldn't explain it, but he knew that this encounter was just the beginning of something much bigger. The journey through the Crimson Swamp was treacherous, but with Sarah by his side, Jason felt a strange sense of calm. She moved with a grace that was almost otherworldly, her steps light and precise despite the difficult terrain. Her presence was both comforting and exhilarating, and Jason found himself drawn to her in ways he couldn't quite understand. As they walked, Sarah began to open up to him. She told him about her people, the Zorathians, a race of beings who had lived on this planet for millennia. They were a peaceful people, but their world was under threat from an invading force known as the Kryll, a ruthless alien species that sought to conquer and enslave. The Kryll have been hunting us for years, she explained, her voice tinged with sadness. They want our planet, our resources, and they won't stop until they have it all. Jason listened intently, his heart aching for her. Why didn't you ask for help? He asked. The Human Alliance could have sent aid. Sarah shook her head. We tried. But the Kryll intercepted our messages. They've cut us off from the rest of the galaxy. She looked at him, her violet eyes filled with determination. But now I have you. Maybe together, we can find a way to stop them. Jason felt a surge of protectiveness wash over him. He didn't know what he could do against an entire alien army, but he knew he couldn't just walk away. I'll help you, he said firmly. Whatever it takes. As they continued their journey, the bond between them grew stronger. They shared stories of their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. Jason told her about Earth, about the vast oceans and towering mountains, about the cities that never slept and the people who called them home. Sarah, in turn, spoke of the crystal forests of Zorath, where the trees sang in the wind and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. There was a connection between them, a spark that grew with each passing moment. It was more than just physical attraction, it was a meeting of souls, a recognition of something deeper. Jason had never felt this way before, and he could tell that Sarah felt it too. As night fell, they found a small clearing where they could rest. Jason set up a makeshift camp, using his supplies to create a shelter. Sarah watched him work, her eyes filled with admiration. You're so resourceful, she said. I've never met anyone like you. Jason smiled, his heart swelling with pride. I've had a lot of practice. Space exploration isn't exactly a walk in the park. They sat together by the fire, the warmth of the flames reflecting in their eyes. Sarah leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Jason wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. You don't have to thank me, he said softly. I'm just glad I found you. As they sat there, under the alien sky, Jason knew that his life would never be the same. He had come to Zorath as an explorer, but now he had a new mission, to protect Sarah and her people, no matter the cost. The next morning, they set out again, their destination a hidden Zorathian settlement deep within the swamp. Sarah led the way, her knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable. But as they drew closer, they began to notice signs of the Kryll's presence, scorched earth, broken trees, and the remains of battles fought and lost. They've been here, Sarah said, her voice filled with dread. We need to hurry. They quickened their pace, but it wasn't long before they encountered a Kryll patrol. The aliens were tall and insect-like, with exoskeletons that gleamed in the sunlight. They moved with a predatory grace, their eyes cold and calculating. Jason and Sarah hid behind a cluster of trees, watching as the Kryll moved through the swamp. We can't take them head-on, Jason whispered. There are too many. Sarah nodded, her eyes narrowing in thought. There's another way. Follow me. She led him through a series of hidden paths, avoiding the Kryll patrols with ease. But as they neared the settlement, they were met with a heartbreaking sight. The once thriving village was now in ruins, the buildings reduced to rubble and the ground littered with the bodies of Zorathians. No, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. This can't be happening. Jason placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll make them pay for this," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I promise." They searched the ruins, hoping to find survivors, but it seemed they were too late. As they prepared to leave, they heard a faint cry coming from beneath a pile of debris. Jason and Sarah rushed to the source, digging through the rubble until they found a young Zorathian girl, barely alive. "Help me," the girl whispered, her eyes filled with fear. Jason gently lifted her out of the debris, cradling her in his arms. "We've got you," he said softly. "You're safe now." Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "For not giving up." Jason nodded, his resolve stronger than ever. "We'll find a way to stop the Kryll," he said. "For her, and for everyone they've hurt." As they left the ruins, the young girl in Jason's arms, he knew that the fight was far from over. But with Sarah by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With the young Zorathian girl, named Lyra, in their care, Jason and Sarah continued their journey through the swamp. They needed to find a safe place to regroup and plan their next move. Sarah knew of a hidden cave system where they could take refuge, and they made their way there as quickly as possible. The caves were dark and damp, but they provided a much-needed respite from the dangers of the swamp. Jason set up a small camp, using his supplies to create a makeshift infirmary for Lyra. She was weak and injured, but with proper care, she began to recover. As they rested, Jason and Sarah discussed their next steps. "We can't fight the Kryll alone," Jason said. "We need allies." Sarah nodded in agreement. "There are other Zorathian settlements scattered throughout the swamp. If we can reach them, we might be able to form an alliance." Jason considered this. "It's risky, but it's our best chance. We'll need to move quickly and quietly." Over the next few days, they traveled to several Zorathian settlements, rallying the survivors and forming a resistance. The Zorathians were hesitant at first, but Jason's determination and Sarah's leadership inspired them to join the cause. Together, they began to plan their attack on the Kryll. Jason shared his knowledge of human tactics, while Sarah provided insight into the Kryll's weaknesses. It was a delicate balance, but as they worked together, they began to form a bond that went beyond mere alliance. There was a growing connection between Jason and Sarah, a deep understanding and respect that fueled their determination. They were more than just partners in battle, they were kindred spirits, united by a common goal. As the day of the attack approached, Jason found himself reflecting on how far they had come. He had started this journey as an explorer, but now he was a leader, a protector. And with Sarah by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The day of the attack arrived, and the Zorathian resistance was ready. They moved through the swamp under the cover of darkness, their hearts filled with determination. Jason and Sarah led the charge, their bond stronger than ever. The Kryll were caught off guard by the sudden assault. The Zorathians fought with a ferocity that surprised even Jason, their bioluminescent patterns glowing brightly in the darkness. The battle was fierce, but the resistance held their ground. Jason and Sarah fought side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized. They were a force to be reckoned with, their connection giving them strength and courage. As the battle raged on, they found themselves face to face with the Kryll commander, a massive, insect-like creature with a cold, calculating gaze. "You think you can defeat us?" the commander hissed, its voice filled with malice. "You are nothing but insects, waiting to be crushed." Jason stepped forward, his blaster aimed at the commander. "We're not afraid of you," he said, his voice steady. "And we're not going to let you destroy this world." The commander lunged at them, but Jason and Sarah were ready. They fought with everything they had, their movements fluid and precise. In the end, it was their bond that gave them the strength to overcome the Kryll commander, striking it down with a final, decisive blow. As the Kryll forces retreated, the Zorathians cheered, their voices filled with hope and relief. Jason and Sarah stood together, their hearts pounding with the thrill of victory. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. "We saved our world." Jason smiled, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We did it together," he said. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." As they stood there, surrounded by the cheers of the Zorathians, Jason knew that his journey was far from over. But with Sarah by his side, he felt ready to face whatever the future held. Together, they had overcome the impossible, and their bond would only grow stronger with time.